We are going to call this session to order. Thank you all for showing up here in the room and by way of video, our virtual audiences. Thank you for joining in. I hear that we have people joining us by way of Zoom as well as our rural campuses. Thank you all for being here and giving us your time this morning. We are all here for the North Louisiana Digital Equity Stakeholder meeting. I will be moderating our meeting today. My name is Darian Atkins. I am the Executive Director of Community and Public Relations for Louisiana Delta Community College, and I'm excited to be here with you and to help everyone figure out exactly what we need in our area, how we need it, when we need it. I know we needed it like yesteryear, but the point is that we're all here together to have that conversation today. And I am going to let my co-host introduce himself.
Thank you, everybody. My name is David Lehman. I want to thank our partners, Delta Community College, the Capitol, all the planning commissions, the universities that are here, the Blanco Public Policy Center. Let's jump into why we're here. What's our story? Why are we here? And our journey really began in 2019 when Governor John Bel Edwards, he saw the need for broadband throughout Louisiana. He saw that 1/3 of all Louisianians didn't have access to high-speed, affordable, and reliable internet. So what he did was he created the Bell Commission, which is the Broadband for Everybody in Louisiana Commission. This brought together stakeholders to identify key action items to solve this digital divide. What happened a few months later? The pandemic hit, and the legislature saw this same need for broadband because 1/3 of Louisianians did not have this basic 21st century necessity. They needed internet to schedule telehealth visits, to telecommute to work, so school children could do their homework online and study and take tests online. So what the legislature did is they created our office, a dedicated state office to identify state, federal, and local resources, bring them together, and solve this digital divide. Since then, we've awarded about $170 million from the American Rescue Plan Act, and there's more money coming. As we prepare for the $1 billion in bipartisan infrastructure law, we want to be cognizant of digital equity. And if we could go to the next slide, that would be helpful. Why do we care about digital equity? We care about digital equity for 4 primary reasons. Because 18% of Louisianians, they have access to no internet at all. When you count those Louisianians who have some access, but it could be slow or unreliable internet, that's when that number increases dramatically to about 1/3. 12% of Louisiana school children, they only have access, they really don't have access to internet at all, or they might have internet access, but they might lack the devices to use that internet. Roughly 31% of Louisiana only has access to satellite connections. 31% of Louisiana, they lack the skills to just navigate online, just to do anything functionally online. So that's why digital equity is so important. But what is digital equity? I'm going to pass this along back to the Planning Commission, and they're going to define the 4 pillars of digital equity. Thank you.
Before I don't mind if I jump in real quick. Sorry, this is gonna be a very, just like our office, just like most anything broadband, it'll be a little bit fluid. So David Lehman is our program manager. He joined us a couple of months ago. He was at the House Fiscal Office assigned to appropriations and a bunch of other agency, and it was important we get someone like him with his skill set, given the enormous dollars we are going to receive and from the infrastructure bill that Senator Bill Cassidy worked really feverishly to pass. So I'm Vineet Iyengar, and I'm the executive director for Connect LA, which is our broadband office. I think I've met most, if not all of you, somewhere on the road over the last 18 months. And this is Thomas Tyler Jr., who's our deputy director. So to signify really how important today is, especially in the next couple of hours, and really signify how important anything and everything digital equity is, you have our entire office here. So we have a large team of 3 people. So you've got all 3 people here, which really signifies the importance of this effort. The last thing is we have been very blessed to travel around the state. We're grateful for that opportunity. We've seen incredible facilities. The spirit that we see from talking to Louisianans across the state in terms of trying to solve this problem has really not only anchored us, but has really lifted our spirits. But we also get hyper encouraged and pumped when you come to facilities as beautiful as this one here. And so for the folks that are in this region, y'all are very lucky, right? To have an asset like LDCC, leadership across the board to help solve this challenge. When it comes to all things workforce, but all things community driven. The last thing I want to say before, I know there's a little bit more of a formal process, and then we'd love to get your feedback over the next couple of hours, is let me just give you a quick snapshot on where we are with all things broadband. So as David mentioned, we have committed 170 out of their $176 million. We issued 69 grant agreements, including the grant agreements in and around this area. We expect to receive those grant agreements signed by Monday, so the 21st of November. And once those grant agreements get signed, then those projects they're on the clock for delivering construction. Average construction is going to be 2 years or less. So that's one swim lane of activity. The second swim lane of activity is getting ready for the infrastructure bill. So they were based on analysis we see from other folks. We're still on track to receive, $1 billion plus from the infrastructure bill. We're going to be as hyper aggressive and hopefully look at getting the first 20% of that money sometime this time next year, maybe September, October-ish. So it's really less than a year away. So we have to develop a 5-year plan in order for us to draw down on that money. And stakeholder engagement conversations like the one we're going to have today is going to be critically important to help feed into that 5-year plan. So that's our second swim lane. The third swim lane is we're at the same time putting together the state's first digital equity plan. And we submit the digital equity plan, and that will then trigger potentially $25 million that we will receive from the infrastructure bill to help execute a digital equity plan. So multiple different swim lanes. Fortunately, they're all converging, so it's not disparate. And so we're going to get there, and we're going to get there together. But that's the goal we have over the next 6 to 12 to 18 months. So there is going to be some choppiness in this, but we feel really good with where we are in terms of all things broadband, and really thanks to all of you for helping us get to where we are today. So with that, sorry for the little bit formal conversations, but at least wanted to give you all an update and look forward to the conversation over the next couple of hours. Appreciate it.
Good deal. Thank you. I want to remind you who are joining us via the internet to make sure that if you have questions, feel free to post those questions in the chat rooms that you have access to, and we have someone who is monitoring those chat rooms, and we will get to your questions as soon as we possibly can. We were talking about the importance of this venture. I'm going to ask my chancellor, Dr. Randy Esters, to come up, and you all can give him a round of applause as he comes, and then we are...
Yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to welcome everybody to Louisiana Delta Community College. I had a mentor who used to say, nothing brings a plan together like the last minute. The last minute got here, it came, it went with the pandemic, and we found out that there was a lot of holes in how we delivered information remotely. And we worked really hard with the state's help and with federal help, and just basically pulling a rabbit out of our hat. And Dr. Rick Gallows from Grambling. Welcome, Dr. Gallows. Always a pleasure to see you. I think he could share that was one of the most trying times in my career as a leader for all of education, not just higher ed, but K-12. So this idea that we can remotely, I can visit with campuses across the state now remotely, and that maybe the next time, if there is ever a next time, that we have a situation where we have to go remote, we won't have to hand out hotspots to hundreds of students like we did the first round. So just welcome to Louisiana Delta. We're thrilled that you're here. We know that this is one of the most, if not the most important project that the state is working on so that we can all play in the same sandbox and have the same advantages that each other has. So again, welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Chancellor. Okay, so I want to remind everyone that we are recording. We are officially recording, and we're going to progress through the slides. This is meant to be conversational. It's not, an extremely formal presentation. So feel free that if you have questions here locally in this room, just raise your hand and we'll get a mic over to you. So if I'm in the middle of saying something, and you have a thought, just raise your hand and I'll get to you. But it's not a lecture, people. So I want you all to loosen up this morning, okay?
What you just said, please, 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 please. I know y'all have burning passions on this topic around access and affordability and digital skills and devices, anything related to broadband. So as we go through these questions, and I think there's 7 questions, I need you to speak. I need to hear. Otherwise, I will call folks, or we will call folks and draw that stuff out. All right. So make this a very interactive session. So
Absolutely. We don't want to end up at the end of this journey not having, because we failed to ask. We want to be a people who ask. And then if we're denied, that's a whole other subject. We know where you live. All right. Okay, let's go through. All right, so defining digital equity. Okay, it's a condition in which all individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed for full participation in our society, democracy, and economy. So the 4 key elements of digital equity: internet needs to be affordable and sufficient, devices for all users, applications and services that are accessible, and digital skills delivered in culturally competent context. So those are the 4 key elements of what digital equity. So if your community is not, doesn't have access to these things, or only to half of them, then you're not meeting that definition of having digital equity. So as we're going through the rest of these slides, think about your communities in these terms: internet, affordable and sufficient. Devices, are devices available for all users? Applications and services, are there applications and services that are accessible in the community, readily accessible for the citizens of that community? And digital skills that are able to be delivered, and here's the key there: culturally competent content. Okay. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I forget I'm a little vertically challenged. It's not like I'm blocking the screen. Okay, what is the digital divide? I hate doing this because digital divide is the gap between those who have affordable access, skills, and support to effectively engage online and those who do not. Divide, the have-nots. The digital divide hinders equal participation and opportunity in all aspects of life. The disproportionality affects people of color, 38.8% of Louisianians who are not white. Indigenous people representing about 60,700 Louisianians. Low-income households, which is 18.6% of Louisiana residents live in poverty. People with disabilities, 15.3%. Older adults, 15.4%, in our rural areas, which make up about 26.9% of our population. That's your definition of the digital. Put on to our digital equity plan. Are we writing a plan? I think you.
Yeah, so we're writing the plan because it's critically important that if we're trying to address the digital divide in Louisiana, we have to make sure that everyone in Louisiana that's unserved, underserved, and our community anchor institutions have access to high-speed, affordable, reliable internet. But even in our drive from Baton Rouge on the eastern side of Louisiana, look, there are places that we physically saw, where there's a fiber box less than 15 feet away from the house, but then that household has satellite. And so when we were talking on the drive, that to me means they have access, but it's not affordable. So then are we truly eliminating the digital divide in Louisiana if we make something acceptable? That's why, with the federal funding that we're going to receive through the infrastructure bill, a lot of that funding will help us. And in addition to the partnership we have with the Board of Regents and all the folks that are listed here, it's going to help us develop a very tactical plan to addressing these issues.
All right, thank you. And so while we're going through this plan, if you can think of challenges that exist that we're not covering through this presentation, please shout them out in the chat box. If you're here in this room, let us know, because those are things that need to also be taken into consideration. Okay, regional partnerships working to collect stakeholder input. There are a lot of groups that are represented across the state who are working to bring resolution to this issue. Right now, today, and the days moving forward, all of you are very key, important stakeholders in this process. So you can consider yourselves as a major partner in this effort. So our regional partners are our colleges and universities, Regional Planning Commission. The regional meeting kicks off stakeholder engagement phase, where we introduce the stakeholder agencies and organizations to process and begin to collect input. All partners, stakeholder agencies, and organizations and individuals are asked to carry this message forward to help collect input through the online form. Speaking of the online form, those of you who are joining us virtually, and those of you who are here in our audience who have access to your digital devices, if you want to pull up the online form and take a look at it as we're going through this process and follow along, that would be great. Just mentioning that we're beginning to collect input, that automatically lets you know, it says process. Process means time. So this is not going to be a quick effort. It is a process.
This is one of the, if not the, well, I say one of the, if not the, okay? So that doesn't make sense. This is a very important slide, because what we're going to need to seek comments and feedback from y'all is the perspective of this digital divide from the eyes of all these folks that either or community organizations that represent these areas, right? So public housing authorities, neighborhood associations. We know the challenges between broadband and farmers. community anchor institutions, and so on and so forth. So as we spend time over the next hour and a half, and as we spend time over the next couple of months on the development of our 5-year plan and digital equity plan, understanding the perspective of these challenges from their eyes as much as we can is going to be critically important. And if there are folks that are not in this room, or folks that are representatives of those organizations that are not in this room, that's fine. We'll make sure we'll come back again to try to capture their thoughts and their concerns. Okay, so as you start to answer some of these questions over the next hour and a half, as much as you can, given your knowledge, view it from their prism, but also from the perspectives that you have in your own sort of capacity. All right. Let this be sort of your guide over the next couple of months.
Okay, the Digital Equity Plan timeline. So if you look across there, this is what we're working with. Analyzing data and building the plan framework Q3 2022. We're developing the creation of Louisiana's vision statement for digital equity analysis of existing data on broadband access and digital literacy skills. Stakeholder engagement, which is where we are right now, fall 2022, conducted in partnership with Regional Planning Commission and post-secondary partners. Hearing from the communities across Louisiana about digital equity and connectivity. The winter of 2022, the Blanco Center will analyze feedback from stakeholder engagement meetings, and synthesized data will be incorporated into draft digital equity plan. The spring of 23, publicly featured opportunities to review and provide feedback on the plan that will have been built so far up to that point.
Darian, this is Harold. We can't hardly hear you when you're facing the screen.
Yeah. Ryan, can I have a mic? Yeah. There we go. Yeah, that's much better. All right, Harold, can you hear me now?
Much better.
Awesome. Okay. This plan is going to include stakeholder regional meetings throughout the state. It's also going to include focus groups who will dig deeper into issues to capture more of the on the ground, the lived experiences of people, especially those who were not able to attend today. Those of you who are here, we're really expecting to pull some of that out of you today, but there will be additional focus groups conducted as well. And then the online form, which we're gonna more on that in just a second, but the door will stay open to collect information through the middle of December. Baseline digital equity data. Okay, that's a lot of text up there, isn't it? This is our dashboard.
This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna punt these next couple of slides because and then we'll circle back at the end. And basically what we're gonna present over the next couple of slides is really data for y'all to look at, view, and so on and so forth, okay? And so it'll give you a better sense on a per parish basis, per region basis on what the challenges are. So rather than go really deep on some of these slides, we'll circle back towards the end where you can actually get access to these slides and where you can review them. All right? Is that fair? So we can go right into the questions.
Let's push on to the questions. All right, question topics. You know, I'm glad I'm on this side of the audience because, you know, being in school, I hated when the teacher would call on me, you know, because I didn't know if I would know the answer just right. But I get to be the one who's asking the questions today. So I feel a little empowered. I'm feeling myself up here a little bit. So if no one answers, I will call on you. All right. So question topics, programs and resources for addressing digital equity. Does anyone have a thought on the programs and the resources needed for addressing digital equity? This is also, go ahead. Okay. Oh, barriers to digital. Okay. There we go. This is where we are. So does your city, parish, or region have existing programs or programs in development aimed specifically at addressing digital equity issues? Does your city, parish, region have programs or programs in development aimed specifically at addressing digital equity issues?
I'm going to real quickly before we get into some of the input, I want to add two more things. So my name's Stephen Barnes. I'm from the Blanco Public Policy Center at UL Lafayette. Along with these questions, we have an online form. And so many of you have a laptop out or a phone. If you've brought a device with you, we just ask you to use that link, or you can use that QR code to find that online form and follow along with us. There may be, even if you share some comments, there may be some additional detail you can add there. Save this link, share it. This is the door that we're opening today that's going to stay open till the middle of December. I'm also going to pass out a paper copy of it. Obviously, if you're writing on there, it may be a little harder for us to decipher if you have the option to type, but we want to make sure we have all modes of being able to collect input and share that. So apologies to delay one more, but I want to make sure we're opening the doors full and wide for those of you viewing remotely or online. You can use that link to connect to the online form and provide input directly in addition to engaging the discussion today. Go ahead.
So on our first slide, you had the 4 pillars that we were out to achieve, or the four goals, I guess to say. And we talked about devices. Now, I understand from a device perspective that through the educational systems that devices are being provided. But what other opportunities are there for us to provide devices?
So yeah, so just quickly on the device, I think there's a device gap of around 262,000 devices outside of the devices that the kids in the schools have and those that are in community colleges. These are, folks that are, for example, disabled. These are folks where they can't even afford to get a device. Now, the Affordable Connectivity Program, the ACP program that's currently available, we've had over 341,000 households already benefit from receiving either $30 a month off their broadband bills, or they can use $100 from that ACP program towards the purchase of the device. But my point is, there's large swaths of people in sort of not in an academic environment that lack a functional device to be able to do basic functional needs. And so in aggregate, there's a 1.5 million Louisianians that don't have access to high-speed internet. Now, that's a combination of number of people that have access issues, number of people that have affordability issues, number of folks that lack digital skills, and then the number of folks that lack a device. And then, so if you piece it together, you'll start to see concentric circles of people that lack affordability, that can't afford it, that may not have a device, and as a result, they're not online.
Can that purely individuals in this regard, or are we
Individuals.
Institutions?
It's individuals, geared towards individuals. Larry, did I answer your question? Maybe sort of ish.
So, certainly as you're doing digital literacy training, you want to be able to open up the opportunity. You don't want to train somebody if they don't have a device, right?
Correct.
Because that's going to make it very complicated for them.
Correct.
So we want to be able to share with them that after they go through the digital literacy training, where can we provide them access to be able to get devices?
Yeah, and so that's where we might have potential funding through our infrastructure bill to help pay for those devices. But that's where partnerships with nonprofits or any other organization, maybe ARP, can come in and say, look, you want to do something hyper targeted for the elderly population that lacks devices. And so that's where partnership with the schools, the community colleges can help piece it together. So, yeah, so to answer this first, I mean, love to get your answers to this first question on, does your city, parish, region have existing programs or programs in development around digital equity?
As I'm walking to the back for this question, online audience, remember you can pose your questions in the chat room.
Thank you. So we here in the adult education department at Louisiana Delta Community College, we offer free digital literacy classes for anybody that needs our help. And so we can also offer credentialing. We utilize the North Star Digital Literacy curriculum and program. And so we have the ability to proctor those assessments that will give them credentials that they can also put on their resumes to help them when they are seeking employment. But it covers everything from how to use a computer to internet skills, all the way to how to support your kids in K through 12 education online.
Okay, great. Anyone else?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Nathan Hall. I'm a campus director for the West Monroe campus of Delta Community College. I do know locally in Ouachita Parish, we have several of the organizations that give out the free cell phones. I don't know how it is for our outside parishes, but that's one of the main things that I come in contact with, either with students or people in the community. They have like the free cell phones, what they get.
Okay.
I believe there's a contractor that's used that I don't know if they're a contractor of the state or who does
Okay.
that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Introduce yourself, please.
Good morning. I'm Krishanda Sanders, Director of the East Carroll Parish Library. For us, a few months ago, we received a grant from the Board of Regents. With the grant, we were able to hire someone to come in and offer the skill set to individuals. So for us, it has been a plus. So I can piggyback off of the community college and the efforts that they're doing. We have someone in-house doing the same thing. But for us, in a small rural area, more is needed, of course, but we are offering the services right now. So this is an awesome opportunity for us. And I'm hoping that I'm not the only library here today representing, because it's needed in our area, especially for what we do. And people come to libraries every day needing this assistance, and we needed to be here to represent libraries so that we can receive some of the funding to help the community.
What other programs are y'all aware of? Libraries, schools,
Councils on Aging.
councils on aging. Do they offer anything?
Okay,
around-
we got one back here. Hold on.
So almost all of our local libraries, at least in Ouachita Parish, they do have computer access and internet access. Also, the government housing, almost all of them have an area that they offer internet, but it's not necessarily for all of the housing. So sometimes, like in their office, people will come up, you'll see them use the internet at the right around the office, but they don't necessarily have it like at each individual housing unit, if that makes sense.
So yeah, to kind of bring everybody up to speed on what's going on within Ouachita Parish, in the Ouachita Parish Library system right now, we actually reached out to our community and to some of our corporate sponsors who actually donated laptops for the Ouachita Parish Library to establish the digital literacy courses. Our first set of training on those are going to start in January. So we'll be starting to offer classes at all the different satellite locations that we got within Ouachita Parish with the Ouachita Parish Public Library. So we'll have that going. Integrated in with that, we're trying to integrate in also telemedicine, so that ultimately that we're sharing with the community that, a great way for you to be able to keep up with your doctor appointments and all that other stuff is by using telemedicine. So we're progressing forward with that aspect of it. We're working also with the United Way to support us in a 211 with their 211 system on just finding out who's got broadband and who doesn't have broadband. So we're in negotiations with them. They've been a great partner to work with us on that. So we're moving forward with some of that stuff and more to come with that. So.
We didn't get your name and who you.
Oh, I'm Larry Bratton with the Washington Parish Police Jury.
Yes, sir.
I'm John Jones, representing Technology for Rural America and also City of Monroe, West Monroe. One thing we're looking at for City of Monroe is they have 8 community centers. I want to be careful here because the mayor's wife is in the audience. We have 8 community centers, and we're looking at equipping those so that they can either be Wi-Fi capable, and also I was talking to Larry about this, extensions of what the library is doing for students who can't make it to a single library. They possibly could be within walking distance of a community center.
Great.
I'm Teresa Bennett with Washington Parish Workforce Development was on your list. We have a computer lab where job seekers and individuals will come in and use the computer for anything they need access to in Washington Parish. And my partner here for Terry, I'm gonna let her speak for the rural area.
Lewis, also with workforce here in Monroe. One of the programs we have worked with in the past has been with the Housing Authority. They also offer that broadband service, the ACA. And so those individuals have been able to utilize that $30 or more in order to lower their bills. So they do promote that as well in the public housing.
Mm-hmm.
So your target audience are job seekers, correct?
I'm Terry Mitchell, Workforce Board Director for 83. I cover all the rural parishes around Ouachita. So during the pandemic, we issued data cards for our participants through Workforce Investment Opportunity Act, where they could access their training on their phones. They couldn't afford additional data, so that's what we provided on the outset. But even in our Tinsall office, we cannot get internet access for our staff, and our whole system is online. So it's a challenge in the rural area.
Well, it doesn't make sense. We'll solve that.
Okay, I'm Tracy Osbury, and I'm with the North Delta Regional Planning and Development District. And our office cover all of Northeast Louisiana. And like Terry said, well, I was thinking about like Tinsall Parish, when you get down to like waterproof, when you have no access to libraries, council on aging, or other things like that, and transportation being a problem. How are we going, I mean, is that being addressed in any type of way? Or
So hang tight with your question actually is the 4th question, I think, which is on barriers. But we'll circle back on it. Yes, sir.
My name's Doug Mitchell. I'm the Executive Director of North Delta Represent. It's the Planning Commission. 11 parishes, as Tracy was referring to. We're working with the other commissions across the state and identifying data points in GIS of where there's holes in there. And we're currently in the process of doing Ouachita Parish and identifying holes from the data that has been submitted to the planning commissions. When we get through with Ouachita Parish, that's going to be about 50% of the coverage of Northeast Louisiana. And hopefully we'll be able to identify the others. You can also go to our website, northdelta.org, where we have some information available where you can see where the fiber is and the other types of internet access, and you can really see where the holes are from that standpoint from the parishes.
All right, we have some comments from our online audience.
Yes, Amelia Brister, Director of Library Services, posts LDCC Library offers access to computers and internet, as well as tutors who help students and community members with digital literacy. So just adding that to the conversation.
Awesome. Anyone else? Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're going to move on to the next one. Operator error. Gee. Does your parish, does your city, parish, or region have resources you are putting towards addressing the digital divide or the digital equity issues? Does your city, parish, or region have resources you're putting towards addressing the digital divide or digital equity issues? And I think in part, we've really just heard that.
Right, so it's a little bit different. So we heard a little bit in the previous question. The difference between this and the previous question is, the previous question said, do y'all have existing programs? This question is, knowing what you know now, coming out of the pandemic, I mean, we're out of the pandemic, what kind of resources are you putting? Right, John talked about the Wi-Fi for the 8 or so community centers. But anything else, and look, if the answer is no, then that's fine as well. Okay.
Yeah, funding for 35 different developments are addressing that.
Okay.
I've recently have written some more to receive some more for the parish, of course. And at the library, we have fiber at the library. And with that, I have to mention that we recently received another unique device. We have a legal navigator, and it actually help people have access to legal questions and concerns, because we're like in a little desert in East Carroll Parish. So therefore, people don't have access to a lot of different resources. So this digital legal navigator, people can actually come in and use it and have access to an attorney. So, I mean, that's great. And it's moving, it's happening, but once again, we need so much more. And it is great to hear so many other people speak about the library, because we are doing some awesome things in our communities, and we need to let people know that. And we're hoping that people could, you know, join along with us and help us increase things within our communities.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, good morning. Jay Ellis, Chief Information Officer for Grambling State. Excuse my voice. I wanted to share something, and this is a story or a conversation that I had recent with a city leader from a different parish, and it all, of course, started during this COVID time. No one realized how or what the impact was of the digital equity divide, and they just basically they built their own antenna system, and it's similar to a Google Maps vehicle. They drove through different neighborhoods and just seeing what type of reception were coming from homes in more of the affluent neighborhoods. And as they drove by each home, they were able to detect wireless signals emitting from those homes. And as they drove through some of the impoverished neighborhoods, they weren't detecting any Wi-Fi signals from those homes. So they were able to take that data and actually gauge and determine the number of homes that were actually lacking this type of technology. And then as a result, they were able to get some grant funding. And then with that funding, they leveraged the library. Basically, all residents, if you had a library card, you were able to go into the local library, and then they would give you the modem and router, everything that's required for you to set up and have internet, of course, at no cost. So that may be something that we could look into. The first step is determining who all needs help. A lot of times we can leverage these social media platforms or some other type of digital technology, but keep in mind if there's no internet or broadband access at home, how do we reach those that are truly impacted?
Appreciate it.
They're digging down in your questions.
Yep.
Okay, those of you who are watching over online, if you want to just speak your question out, you can unmute your mic and share your question, or you can choose to put it in the chat. Just if you're going to speak it, just make sure you unmute your mic. So-
Remember the resources here is not just purely financial. I mean, it could be through partnerships with your local chambers or local employers, et cetera. So, as you think through resources, just be as creative as you can as you move forward with this.
That's a good point because some people may not have put that in that context in their mind. Are there specific barriers facing your city, parish, or region that pose challenges for achieving digital equity in your region?
So
By
this-
merit of the fact that we're all here, I'm sure that we should hear some robust conversation around
that's
this
right.
question.
All right, this should take up the rest of the hour, right? But let's really, this is where we want to really dive deep on the barriers. Who wants to go first? Yes, ma'am.
Parish, say again, Tensile Parish, probably one of the rules you want to know. And if you have a library or something, which I don't think Waterproof does, and you have to go maybe into St. Joe and you don't have that transportation, but still, I think that's going to be one of the largest barriers that is going to be to the rural areas. And also, when you get into the rural area like that, the aging population, and if they do have access to a vehicle, how are we going to get them out to get the training that they need, get them to understand that the internet is not their enemy, it can be their friend, because my mom is 80 and she just refuses. And so, those all barriers, the age and the transportation.
Also trust.
Let me ask this. Does Council on Aging exist in all of our parishes? I know they are located in a great many, but are they in every parish?
I think Waterproof have a meal site. They do what's called home delivered meals. So still,
I was thinking in terms of the transportation, and mind you, my only frame of reference is Ouachita's Council on Aging. I know in their service that they provide transportation to and from the center for various activities, and I'm just trying to get a frame of reference for do all of the Council on Agings really kind of perform or do the same services? Because if so, they do not.
Ago, they said that they have not started back their transportation because of COVID. So that's a barrier for us.
But traditionally,
they do.
Have.
So that has been an issue.
I'm just trying to see if that might be an issue for access, maybe for that older population. Okay, so we know that it's not. They don't all do that. Thank you. Okay, other challenges. We heard transportation, and by way of that, we also heard trust. What are some other challenges that communities may face in establishing digital equity in your region? Affordability. Can you elaborate on that? I mean, because that's real general, but.
Well, just from our experience trying to deliver training services and our workforce development services, if our individuals come in those rural parishes and we say, oh, you can access Delta online, they can't afford it, so we gave them the cards, or they don't have the service, period. So, and no transportation to get there, like Tracy said. So it's affordability, it's access, it's all the needs.
Affordability of training. I'm sure that probably crosses many of us, especially who are in this room, because we would affordability of the services. Yeah, we would offer more if we had more finances to work with.
That's the reason we're here, no money.
Yeah, and I think that was probably a given. And so, and I'm pretty sure that all agencies and organizations would echo that sentiment. But for this, we also want to dig a little deeper to determine, what are some other challenges besides money? If we had all of the money, what other challenges would still exist?
And yeah, so that's what I was going to ask. So look at again, going back to that chart with the red blocks, what are the challenges that small business owners are having? What are the barriers or challenges that folks that are disabled are having? What are other challenges that minorities are having? Now, you could bucket everything into affordability, device, literacy, and access. I think we know that, but behaviorally, let's dive deeper into the different challenges that different segments of the population have from your perspective. Okay, so fear of the unknown, which is a very valid fear, right? Especially for folks that are suddenly you got to pay bills online, you got to download your coupons down online and all that stuff. Okay.
So
yes, sir.
In the very, very rural places that we deal with, sometimes we have even a hard time finding a training spot for people because there's not even access for any kind of internet. So Tensall Parish comes up a whole bunch, but even there recently we're scheduling one and just trying to find one spot that would support having a class at.
So the actual physical location.
Yes.
Okay.
So not even to the local housing,
Yep.
And then locally, we see a lot of people who want to do something different, want to change their life in some way, and they might have the cell phone to do it, but they don't necessarily have any kind of computer or any kind of access with the computer. If they did have a computer, having the access to be able to do anything from there, mainly inside the housing, low-income housing, they don't necessarily have it for the whole low-income housing. So then they can't really do classes from that you might see in someone who's a wealthier place.
Okay. That's good. Thank you, Nick. What are their barriers? There are plenty of barriers. Yes.
So from a connectivity aspect, so as we look out over, and certainly Washoe Parish is what we're looking out over. So as we look out over Washoe Parish, we see some of the areas that have what I would call minimal services, and we see some of the areas that have none of the services. But when we really step back and we've been taking a look at some of the long range planning that we need to be doing to make sure that we get connectivity to everyone, it becomes pretty evident that you just don't have the funding, even with the ARPA funds that we had gotten, to be able to provide what I would call services. And look, most underserved people are in the most remote areas that we're going to be trying to go to. So as we look on down the line, and we have communications with some of these people that have received the RDOF grants, we're looking at somewhere down the line of 6 years before we're ever even going to see something go there. I'll relate that back to, I found it very interesting that certainly when you look at what's going on in Ukraine and you look at a company similar to SpaceX, that they go in and they're providing free Wi-Fi service or internet services to the whole country there. Have we looked into anything that we can bridge that long-term gap with?
So the barrier, Larry, you're highlighting is really the timeline. There's a dislocation in timeline of the different federal programs. And I don't want to dive too deep because there's a couple more questions, but the different federal programs that are going to impact Louisiana, the infrastructure bill, our gumbo dollars from Treasury, and the FCC program all operate on different timelines. If you are a household that's going to be serviced by this RDOF program, that timeline to build is 6 years. Our program, 2 years or less. Infrastructure bill, 2 years or less. So are there bridge solutions? Yes, there are. And we're actively exploring those. If we're, I think if we're creative with our funding, creative in the sense we really stretch out the dollars, then that's always a possibility. Yes.
Beneath, I would add this, and we've kind of, I think we can hear it in the room, and we've seen this in 2 of our rural parishes, and there's pockets of excellence where people are doing things, but what we found, and it worked pretty well in Caldwell Parish, is there's no coordinated marketing of all these programs in terms of people, and we talked about the internet and Facebook and things like that, but the parishes where we have helped form community committees where all the stakeholders could compare notes and kind of do their own marketing, and then using the schools who have probably, especially in a rural parish, have greater access to more families than whether some of the programs they have was Blackboard. I'm not a teacher, but they have these system-wide programs where they can reach almost every family in some way. By using that resource and then having frequent discussions about getting things out. I was talking to this lady here about the churches, bringing them in. A lot of churches in rural markets, you have the right channels, but getting all that coordinated in a way where people know where to go is really, to me, one of the bigger barriers.
So that's actually a question that maybe the last question, because the last question is on communication. Because no, that's okay. That's okay. But that is a very, very big challenge. Is what we've learned and what we've observed in doing these is that there's a lot of people doing things, but no one's aware of it. Yes.
In dealing with Union and Lincoln Parish, they also, there's access for the satellite internet, but a lot of them, they're not getting no companies are really going and trying to reach the single houses. And in both those parishes, a very high amount of Hispanic population in there. So we're seeing a lot of those students have zero internet access inside those 2 parishes that come to us. One thing that we see in sitting in some planning meetings with some companies is that many of them, when they plan to hit the highest populated areas, even with this new dollars coming in, to get the most amount of money for that. So then you see very little planning at all to go to those areas that have low population per mile.
So, yeah, we knew that was going to happen, but we have a plan for that going forward. So, yes, ma'am.
I have a comment. Hello, everybody. My name is Kenya Ross. I'm with KNOE 8 News. Because I'm with the media, I'm not really sure if I'm able to participate, but I just had a thought because what you said, you mentioned, you requested for us to, dive deeper into the barriers. I just had a thought. This past summer, I actually did a story about a family donating computers to a recreation center on the south side of Monroe. And I understand what Ms. Atkins was saying, we can have all the money in the world, but there are still barriers. So I had a thought. What about time conflict? For instance, the recreation center closes at 8 p.m. and libraries, they close like at 5 p.m., right? So what about that mom, dad, or caregiver who doesn't get home until after 8 or after 5, and they still need time to help their children with their homework? So I don't know, is, time conflict, is that barrier? Where is 24-hour access?
So that is a great barrier. And that is something we heard, right? Is parents, the realities of life, the only time that parents have time to spend time with their kids and doing homework, if they don't have access, is at the libraries. And if that library is closed at 7 or 8 o'clock, then it's a challenge. By the way, just a public service, the coffee and courtesy of LDCC, we have coffee and donuts, I guess, or cookies or whatever. But anyway, feel free. It's just outside. I know, feel free to go out at any time and come back in. Okay.
All right. So when Nathan was speaking a minute ago, when he was talking about the Hispanic population, it made me think about language being a barrier in some areas that we hadn't put on the table.
That's a good point on timeline on the opening and close of libraries and other facilities.
Not to beat a dead horse, but I do have 10 career centers in 10 rural parishes. And I am only aware of one provider, AT&T, and they have the worst customer service ever. And so part of it is probably there may be another provider. I'm just not aware of providers. So that's a barrier, just not knowing what's out there or
Yeah.
who's available.
Yes, ma'am.
Timmy?
Yes.
Okay, Ashley Ellis. I'm also the pre-educator program director here at Delta, but I'm also a Bessie board member and a former K-12 educator. I guess you're always a K-12 educator. That's just how it goes. One of the things I've been talking about with my peers here, even in higher ed, is that our students think that their cell phones are a tool and maybe they have access, specifically access, but for real higher ed level work to actually complete the programs they're supposed to be completing, they're trying to write essays and term papers on a phone. And so what we found is that time is an issue because coming on campus closes at a certain point, and then also thinking that that is an appropriate tool for higher ed or for classes. And I think that starts in, elementary through junior high, high school, is that our students don't understand that having access to the right tools, being a PC, is important. And so another barrier is just that access to the actual equipment itself. I mean, I know the digital piece is a component of that. And I think that many times our students would even use the hotspot off their phone, but they don't have the tool itself.
Is it a function of the tool itself or the digital skills? Are you seeing among younger folks that digital skills are an issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the K-12 world, we're trying to teach students how to use those tools in a, I guess, an effective way versus just an entertainment way.
Right.
And so to use them productively seems to be the challenge, which is why, once they're leaving K-12, they come to higher ed, they're still using their cell phones because they've always had either school access to a computer, and now you're in higher ed and you don't have that tool.
So a suggestion was made when we were in Schriever, Louisiana, I think a couple of weeks ago at Fletcher Community College, where one of the participants said, should we make digital skills a requirement among K through 12, similar to civics? I don't know if they do civics in K through 12 anyway. I graduated.
They do.
They do. So it was something that was brought up that I think the people, I think in Schriever, one of the stakeholder engagement sessions suggested, as I wouldn't say it's a forcing mechanism, as opposed to at least you leave high school with at least a functionality of digital skills, and whether you pursue the community college route or what have you, at least you have something.
I will say that in the last 5 years or so, and especially post-COVID, there's been a huge focus on teaching students those digital skills. We also do our standardized tests digitally. I mean, they're taking those assessments online. And so I think that the skills are there. I think it's back to they don't have the actual tool. They're taking those same skills and trying to use Google Drive, Google Docs on their phone. And that becomes a bigger, it's just a.
So it's a device issue.
It's a device issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I weigh in on here at Lake Providence?
Yeah, go ahead.
We just
Introduce yourself. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Go ahead and introduce yourself first.
They want you to introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Harold.
You're
Ted. I teach English at Providence campus, and I also teach computers. We just got a grant Starlink satellite for internet providers. They just deliver the satellite dish to homes, and people cannot access, and they bypass AT&T.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, Harold.
Thank you.
I would just like to add on to what Ashley has said. Digital, I think, should start in early childhood, not just waiting until they get in early childhood would be better. 'Cause I've been visiting Educare, and they're starting them at 2 years old, they can sit down and do the digital thing.
Hmm.
Also, you have the public housing. Don't forget about the housing choice voucher. I'm over the Washita Parish Police Jury Housing Program. We issue vouchers, and that's where a lot of them, when they move out, they don't have, and I'm putting a plan in place to submit to them during our budget season so we can add that as a cost.
Okay.
What are those vouchers for, Doretha? Okay. Gotcha. Okay, so what about challenges that our small businesses are facing? I mean, and business in general. I know I do a lot of online shopping. I mean, I'm hitting up Walmart every week to get my online grocery order done so that it can be ready for pickup right after church on Sunday. I can go home and be ready for the week. And Amazon is like, I mean, the UPS and the FedEx guy, I mean, they're at my house all the time. What barriers are small businesses facing? What's hindering them from being able to do their business maximally?
Same thing, access, same thing, okay.
Internet speed.
Credit card processing, yeah. They need training.
And the training.
Yep. Okay, I think we could maybe move to the next question.
Are there unique digital equity barriers facing certain populations in your community?
I think we sort of started addressing this. I mean, I think not sort of, more than sort of started addressing this in the previous question, but anything else that we can dive deeper on with regards to specific segments of the population in your community?
As a problem, you know, you might reach this family that's 10 miles from town, but what about the ones that are 20 miles from town?
So-
That one family out in the middle of nowhere, you know, everybody needs that. Stressed out, I guess I would say.
So let's dive deeper. How do they receive information in general?
You know,
In general,
most of the time, if they're not in church or if they don't see it at the grocery store or something like that,
they're not going to know.
they're not going to know. Yeah, exactly. You know, you have, and even with the TVs now, you have all the smart TVs, and the TV doesn't work if you don't have access to the internet.
You mentioned churches. What challenges do the faith-based community have when it comes to broadband?
Same problem.
Same problem?
You know, especially if they are if they're in that rural area. I think rural itself is probably the biggest barrier. So they're gonna have the same issues, you know, limited to no access at all. I do. You know, just like for this meeting, you know, it's hard to send out notices when you have to put it in the mail. I'm dealing with the community now, and that's how they receive everything in Lilly, Louisiana. And so they receive everything through mail.
That's what one council member we talked to a council member who said, maybe the best way to, and we'll go to the communication question in a few slides. They said the best way to communicate to their constituents is through snail mail. So, you introduce yourself. Come, you got to know for the purposes of.
Thomas Tyler, with the broadband office. No, I wanted to address your comment in regards to a rural versus extremely rural, because I think that's an interesting dichotomy to think about as we move through this, because a challenge for a rural person might be different for an extremely rural person. So you go that step further, that last foot of access or reaching that person. So I wanted to pose the question to you and maybe to everybody, what metrics would you use to define rural versus extremely rural? So.
I've got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Along this line. Just curious, how long did it take you to drive from Lake Providence this morning?
30 minutes.
And that's to the northeast. If you go to the southeast, Tensall Parish, waterproof, it's probably an hour 45 drive with someone that has transportation. And when you're talking about the rural barriers and the extreme rural barriers, that's the problem, is the distance people have to travel. And some do not have transportation at all.
So
extremely rural might be defined as the length of time it takes to get somewhere.
It might as well be 5 hours.
So let's take, and I'm gonna just, this is we still have a little time. So let's use waterproof as an example. All right, let's make this a group exercise. Let's say, okay, and we are gonna make this happen. So we're gonna have enough federal funding to ensure that every household in waterproof has access to something that's affordable. How can we address the digital equity barriers around device, around digital skills, around digital literacy in a town like Waterproof, if the distances are so great, even among residents in Waterproof?
Because if they don't know, so look at Waterproof. Waterproof is an aging community, because all those that can get out have gotten out, and it's an aging community, and it's the lack of communication. Therefore you don't have you don't have access to the internet, the rural churches. So if it's all rural and it's all of the elderly population, so who's reaching out to these people, and how do we know their needs? And let's just say Miss Johnson, she can't get out to go to church anymore. Transportation will only go so far. Also, if they do provide transportation, I think there's a mileage limited on how far transportation will go. So it's always going to be back. How do we reach them?
And yeah,
I'm not for sure if we talked about age gap just yet. One of the things, I know a committee that I sit on, majority of them are a certain age and a certain age. And a certain age, above, I guess, 60, 65, they are determined, I want you to continue to mail it to me. I do not want to learn the internet. I don't want any of that, because it's just not there. I mean, I understand that's the quickest and easiest. We even try to do Zoom. They don't want to learn any of that. So I don't know how you get to the point of making a certain population understand the necessity of that, but it's just, I think it's going to take some time for that, but that is a big problem, a big barrier for the age we are in right now.
no, what you're touching on is an issue of adoption. So what I mean by adoption is, just because I get someone through our federal funding access to high-speed, affordable, reliable internet does not mean that person will what? Pay for it. And they will not pay for it if they don't see how it's going to impact their lives. So that is something that is going to be a monumental effort that all of us in this room and the folks on the call, on the Zoom call, are going to have to work together on, because it'll be really a busted investment. So
we have a comment over here on the faith-based communities.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and add something to what you just said, which is very important, driving the adoption rate in our age community. If you look at what's on the news, which is usually where they get their information, their source of information, you'll see the horror stories about identities being stolen, things of that nature. it's always being painted in a negative light. So what we have to do from the technology community is let them know that there's a way to coexist, how to maneuver on the internet, but in a safe manner. Things of that nature help drive the adoption rate.
But what you're also talking about and touching on is the unintended consequences of getting everyone internet, which is increased scamming, increased mental health issues, increased isolationism, the kinds of things that have especially bubbled up coming out of the pandemic.
I think rolled over into that as well as especially our elderly population, but they're not the only ones that fall into this category. Is a fear of not being able to learn what needs to be learned to be able to access those things. And so automatic rejection happens because they feel inadequate about learning something that feels intimidating.
So we've been talking a lot about Tinsall. I'm actually from Tinsall, I was born and raised, and I live there currently. So I completely understand this population that lives there. And it's definitely about changing the mindsets of the individuals that live in those communities. And it is going to be critical to get, like the mayor, Jared Botley, in Waterproof. He is an amazing mayor who has a lot of connections, and he gets out and he goes house to house. He is going to have to be involved 100% throughout this process. But it's just changing their mindsets and getting them to understand how this is going to help them. Because like somebody said, it's a ghost town in Waterproof. Businesses have moved out, which has been a critical issue that we have been facing in Tinsall because there has not been a qualified workforce. So we have lost so many businesses, and the police jury is working extremely hard to try to bring in new businesses to our parish, but they can't get them to come in and to commit because we don't have a workforce. And there are, like Nathan said earlier, a lack of opportunities for us to provide those trainings there because of the infrastructure that is existing there in the parish. So there is a lot more than just digital equity, but that plays a hand in us providing these digital resources and skills that we have to think of that is outside of just this one issue.
You talk about, I guess, a bleeding out of talent or lack thereof workforce in smaller communities like this. But part of that is because you have a lack of access to qualified educators as well. And one of the issues that we're seeing in the K-12 world is that, there are districts with less than 1-2 certified teachers in an entire school district. Small communities, small districts. And then you start thinking about, well, how does that bubble out into the community? There's your workforce piece, as well as, we're talking about teacher certification, which is the work I do here. And recently we talked about we need to remove one of the barriers for teachers becoming certified. And it was the Praxis Core, which is an exam that teachers take. It's kind of like a glorified ACT. And what we were finding is that these teacher candidates were having trouble because they were struggling in math. When we go back and look and realize that they've never had a certified math teacher their whole life. And so when you start talking about equity and access to qualified educators is a piece of this. If, one of the things that I was asked when I ran for Bessie was, how do you get quality education to our rural communities? And one of the first things that came to mind for me was, well, obviously we can use our virtual instruction, digital classrooms, but we can't. And we're still having those issues even in school districts. So students don't have access to those qualified educators. Therefore, your community continues to struggle. And so I think that when we talk about digital equity barriers, we're talking about access to just basic education at this point.
Education and healthcare, because there's an acute teaching shortage. There's also an acute healthcare allied professional shortage, especially in rural areas.
Yeah, I think that hit barriers as well as some unintended consequences on that one.
All right. Anything else? I know we've done a great job on this question.
I'd like to hear from some of our rural campuses, because this one is really targeted directly to your communities, unique barriers that are facing certain populations in your community. I know we've talked some about our handicap, our disability audience. We've talked about the small businesses. We talked a little bit about minorities. Any other unique populations?
Areas around Tensile on the river, it's a lot of agriculture, and now their equipment is all digital. I don't know. I would assume that they were having trouble. That's just a certain population that might be challenged.
Oh, they are definitely challenged. Those guys. We could move on to the next. Yes, John. Wait.
My question was, are the digital literacy programs have Spanish versions? Because we've been asked that question in Union Parish.
The 5 pilot digital literacy effort that the Board of Regents launched. So it's really in East Carroll. I think it was East Carroll Rapides, Livingston, Westfell, West Feliciana, and Jefferson Parish. That's a really good question. I don't think so, but that's something we're going to have to incorporate.
I think you're going to need it eventually.
Yep.
The digital literacy classes that we do offer, you said you were in Union Parish. Our adult education instructor there in Union, Miss Wendy Comfort, she is bilingual, and so she can provide digital literacy classes in Spanish to that population there. And the online program that we use is also offered in Spanish as well.
I know in Jefferson Parish, when we did something very similar, the librarian there said that they partner with Ideal Supermarket, which is a Hispanic grocery store, to get more and more people encouraged to take digital literacy classes. So.
Okay, next question. Does your community, business, or organization have a digital equity plan in place or under development?
Again, if the question is no, it's okay. That's why we're here.
They don't have the internet. So by the time they get something in snail mail, you know, the meeting is taking place now. So who's relaying this to them, and who's that vocal point for them for us to find out if these communities are not doing anything?
Well, you know, I mean, as much as we can, the three of us, I mean, that's why we travel a lot, because we have a good sense of what people are and aren't doing, but it's through conversations like today. And again, if the question is no, if the answer is no, then that's part of this whole exercise at a
It's good feedback.
Yeah, if I could jump in on this again, Stephen Barnes, director of the Blanco Center. I think that to me is the number one question, and something we've been struggling with for several months here. And I think Vineeth, Tyler, David, and their office is working tirelessly. They've brought us on board now. We've got 10 people at the Blanco Center working on this effort. We've got a growing list of partners just in this region, and we're building teams like this throughout the state. And I think the real answer to that question is even that's not enough. And honestly, what these regional meetings, what we really want to do is we're hearing a lot of good stuff today. And this is going to be great. And we'll circle back to this at the end. But we'd actually like to ask you to help us carry that message forward. And so some of what we've introduced here, you know, this is the beginning of opening the doors for input like this. So we want to get all of you to share what you already know and then get plugged into these systems. So we've got that online form. Again, I heard that loud and clear. There's a lot of places that don't have that access, but maybe you could bring your device and help stretch and extend that access. And then we've got these paper copies, right? So we can't rely entirely on technology. You know, that's going to help us extend our reach. But I think the more that we as a state can expand and make it more of a dispersed effort to try to bring in that information, we're going to just do a better job of capturing everything that we really need to hear. So if you can, you and everyone here, we're really asking you to walk out of here today and become digital equity ambassadors and bring this message. So if you can extend your access through a device that you could bring to back to your organizations, to your community, to a community event, great. You know, we heard an organization in the Alexandria area come out of this meeting saying, well, we're going to go set up a table at a community event with a Wi-Fi or a cell connected tablet and just try to help, collect input there. But that form and anybody who's interested, we can email you a PDF if you want to print 100 copies of it. But on that form, if you keep it front and back, we won't lose the name and the contact of who sent it to us. People could take a picture with their phone and email it back to us or drop it in the mail. So we want to give as many options and get as much help as we can, because we realize this is a big challenge, and really understanding the unique challenges facing different populations, different locations is important in this process.
Yes, sir.
Again, I'm here as the Vision Chair for Louisiana Delta for Liberal Arts, but I'm also a member of the Ouachita Parish Broadband Committee. And we do have a meeting this Monday here on the campus, and we're focused on workforce and making sure that we have people that can enter those courses. And so we have public body meetings, and we'll be here in the conference room on Monday at 5:30 on the 21st. So we would love, because we really are trying to get in place this digital equity plan to ensure that we do have the workers that can help to bring about broadband in this community, but also to ensure that we know that our residents have access to it. We've also, and I kind of went out to the refreshment to get some of that, is that, we have also partnered with United Way and 211. And even when we partnered with them, United Way in Northeast Louisiana really does service a whole community, not just Ouachita Parish. And they are using that as a way to really give access to people that don't have broadband, is that they could call 211 and then show that they may not have that access. So hopefully that is focused on Ouachita Parish, but of course, so many people in this area use 211 and United Way that will help to really understand what are the community's needs and bringing about broadband to the whole area as well. But we will be here at 5:30 on Monday in our conference center. So it is an open body meeting. If you need to come and, let us know some of the things that you need and what your constituents need or the people that you serve, we would be happy to know, because that's one of the things what the Ouachita Parish Broadband Committee is hoping to really do.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
You have a question?
Just curious, have you all on the state level gotten with other states who have been successful with, with plans and things like that in the past? It's just, I just asking a question. Have you actually went or talked to anyone beyond the state of Louisiana to actually see how can we make this a successful plan?
In other words, have you all seen a plan, developed plan implemented and been able to see the success of it?
So other states are a little bit behind us, actually. So it's shocking, okay? But no state, is that fair, Tom? You were at the Fed event in Dallas.
So,
You want to come up?
I think a lot of what we're trying to do, because this is a 50-state problem, and a lot of what we see are ideas that are specific to maybe a small town or an area where people are trying to make a difference and trying to make change. And I was on a panel a few weeks ago with someone who's out in Arizona who does a lot of work with tribal communities. And there's a lot of different stories like that of people around the country that are making things work. As far as a statewide digital equity or digital inclusion plan, that really hasn't been done yet. That's the whole purpose of what we're here for. So we're fortunate that we were able to launch our planning ahead of time and receive funds to start this process before any other state. And so part of what we contribute here helps to go and define what's in our plan, but we're always looking for other ideas that we think are that work in other states that would be beneficial here. So if you know someone who lives in Texas or in Virginia and they say, and they talk about different plans that are going on there or things that are happening locally, whether that's with stakeholders that you know across the country, those are the types of stories we want to hear. And that's what helps us decide what's going to work here in Louisiana. So,
yeah. So that's the challenge with all of this. All in is the feds are doing it at this scale for the first time. We're doing it at the state level for the first time, and locals. I mean, all of y'all, all of us. So it is a bit of a challenge. But we've partnered also, in addition to Stephen and the team here and having conversations like today, we've also partnered with the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. And so they're based out of Columbus, Ohio. They helped write the Digital Equity Act. That was part of the infrastructure bill. So they're helping to guide us and serve as our sort of coach at the federal level for all things digital equity. I know we've got a couple of minutes left, and I know we've got a couple more questions. Maybe you could jump to the.
What supports does your community need to address digital equity gaps in your community? What supports does your community need to address digital equity gaps in your community? You may want to define the supporters.
Yeah, it's similar. It's similar to that other question about resources when in existing programs. But you were touching on it, right? When you said you using the $20,000 in digital, $20,000 grant that you got from the Board of Regents, you hired someone at the library, but you wish there was more. What does that more mean to you?
More to me means having the availability to reach everyone. Like the lady mentioned about being rural, it's hard when you have someone that's set aside to work specifically on digital literacy, and then this person has a hard time reaching out to get people to actually come in to learn. So that's difficult. So, and for me, the funding part is East Carroll Parish, rural, I have a very small budget. So to have some extra funding, because when this 20,000 runs out, that means I have to use the library funds to pay this individual, because I want to keep her because she's doing an awesome job. She's working in the community, she's reaching people. So when I think about the fact of the 20,000 is going to be depleted within the next 4 months,
yeah,
it terrifies me because, then I'm going to lose someone that we really need in our community that's reaching out and helping others. So
got it.
What supports? I know someone mentioned about, John asked earlier about if something was, did it exist in the Spanish version? Maybe that could.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to,
or
you may have to do that depending on the population. Yes, sir.
I'm Chance Epinette. I'm the IT director with ULM. So would there be long-term funding opportunities to establish personnel in all of the communities to help maintain, break fix, remediate security, things of that nature, that these individuals aren't going to be able to do on their own? So how that's kind of like the next step beyond establishing it.
So
how do you maintain it?
Well, what are we maintaining? The networks?
Well, things that break, their devices break, their security becomes a problem.
Yeah, that's
That's a good question. We've thought about what a funding model would look like that would place people in every parish. But that would require getting permission from the feds, which we can work on. All right, I think we have one more question. Is there one more? Yes.
As we work to address digital equity, are there specific modes of communication that we should consider to reach specific stakeholder groups? I know earlier we heard that in the rural areas, we need snail mail sent out to communicate, and we need it sent in plenty enough time so that people can make arrangements to be available.
And we're able to send this out. And I guess with, like, say, North Delta, we got back and we wanted to send all this out, maybe with the self-stamped envelope to give back to us. If we for them, we would send this information on to you. Okay, so that's you know, we need spots like that for people to know that, hey, if you get out and do this, if you have these community meetings, we need a point to where they can send that information in to where their voices and their concerns can be heard. And then they need to know where to go from having that community meeting.
They will.
Point taken on that. I will pivot to say that online form, they still have until the middle of December to get that information in. So for those that haven't been touched, that haven't been reached, yes, they have till the middle of December to be able to give that feedback. So we still have a little bit of time on that, but we still do recognize that as a consideration that needs to be made. As we work to address digital equity, are there specific modes of communication that we should consider to reach specific stakeholder groups? How are your people consuming information? That's the question. How are the people in your community consuming information? Is it by newspaper? I mean, do you have is that the primary source of information? Is it by our local news channels? Is it through magazines? Is it through radio? Is it through church or community groups?
Newspaper, and you think about the rural areas, they don't put out a daily paper anymore. I mean, I don't know how often they put it out.
Weekly, likely.
Okay, weekly. And so you have a time to get it in and a time to get it out. So therefore, it still needs to be out in plenty enough time if you want to use the newspaper. As far as churches, you know, some meet once a month, every second Sunday. So time in rural
is different from time in the more urban areas. I get that. So, but is that I think this question is really leaning more to how are they consuming information? Is that their primary place or one of their major places that they're consuming information? Are they getting it through their church community? Are they getting their information through their newspapers or the libraries? You know, the different community groups, how are they getting information? How do we get this? What's the most effective way we can get information to them?
into City Hall, maybe to pay their light bill, I mean, water bill or whatever, that they are, you know, picking up these things. And, you know, it's just trial and error when it comes to rule of how we get information out to them. Because, you know, one thing works best here and one thing works best here, you know. waterproof, again, is a prime example. There's, there's hardly any to very little digital there. So that's a 2-hour, 2.5-hour drive, especially for me because I drive slow. So to get there, just to get them the information that they need.
Yeah, we have one over here.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jason Thomas. I'm with the Jackson Parish Hospital. One of the things that has worked for us, we run a telemedicine program with the local school district. Provide a telemedicine card alongside the school nurse, but we can't treat students without parental consent. So we go through the local school district, provide all of the consent forms to them. We use their parent notification system, and we use the children to get to the parents, to get their consent, to get them aware of what we're doing, how we're trying to help them. But that reaches the parents that have school-age children. But we also have a patient population that's elderly, that's rural. We've got those deep woods people that there's no cell phone signal that goes out there, but they still do have the ancient POTS line at home, that wire line that goes to their house. We stood up a chronic care management call center, basically, where the people who don't have transport to come to the hospital, we can still take care of them. We can still make sure they're taken care of their prescriptions. We have pharmacies that drive out to them, but we are calling those people on their wireline phones to get them, to notify them that, hey, we're trying to make sure that we know what's going on. Like, that's a potential way to reach some of these folks. You still have to deal with the proliferation of scam calls and spam calls and people no longer answering their phones. But we are having some success in those areas with reaching those rural populations through those methods.
I was going to also mention cable. I know that sounds, pretty basic, but a lot of our rural communities are, the residents that I've talked to or the student populations even, people still watch the news and, cable TV. And so commercials, any type of information that way. I know that's what politicians still use that. I know that, it's one of the fastest ways, and I don't know how expensive it is. And if we could get, some kind of plan there, but cable seems to work well as well.
Well, thank you for your comments, and thank all of you for being here today. My name is Gerald Long. I work for Senator Cassidy. I do one thing for him, and that is I travel the state with broadband issues. I was hired on November 15th, 2 years ago, and this is my 127th broadband meeting statewide. I cannot tell you how important this is as we move forward with technology that's going to bring Louisiana to a place we've never been before. Someone recently told me we're in the year 2022, but Louisiana is in 2012 because of technology. I had the privilege as a state senator serving with President Rick Gallo. Rarely do we have a president of a university take time to spend his mornings with us. And I'd ask Senator Gallo, President Gallo, come on up, Rick. Grambling University is a major aspect of higher education. When we look at Louisiana Tech, our community colleges, NLU, ULM, Northwestern State, in all of our schools, they play a major role. But Rick, would you talk for just a moment about the significance and the importance of high technology as we prepare for the next generation of students?
Thank you, Senator. One of our former Senate colleagues, Bob Kostelka, used to always say, the answer is money. Now, what's the question? And so Beneath has access to about $1 billion, so that's why I'm here, to figure out how we can connect to the resources to really get broadband out across our state. Of course, at Grambling, we're incredibly excited to launch what will be Louisiana's first and only digital library. We've got cybersecurity, we've got cloud computing, but we have to have kids who are prepared to come and utilize that digital library and to be able to study and learn cybersecurity and cloud computing. So we all have a vested interest in building up this broadband capacity. And somehow bridging this digital divide. We've got a Bessie board member here, and Ash, good to see you. And again, it's going to take all of us really collectively coming together with our ideas and with our collective efforts to make a difference. Now, I will tell you that in some areas, we're doing really well. I had an opportunity to be with the governor last week over at the Cyber Innovation Center, and things we're doing with the Cyber Security Commission and some of the other digital and technology areas. We're way ahead of many other states across the country. So in some areas we are in 2022, and in fact way ahead of some others. But obviously, we've got a lot of work to do here. So again, I thank you for this opportunity. Beneath, thank you for all the work that you continue to do in representing the governor's vision and Senator Long in moving forward Senator Cassidy's vision of having Louisiana as a real stakeholder and being involved in moving our state forward by being digitally connected. So thank you all, and God bless. Have a good day.
So I think there's one more slide, which is really the outgoing input. Do you want to talk about sort of as we move forward on input?
And I think I've addressed this several times. So moving forward, and you may want to stay there in case I forget something. So moving forward, of course, there's going to be information gathered and collected for a period of time. There will be communication. Well, the dashboard will be the one place for certain where current progress will be reflected. We're still kind of working out the kinks on what are the modes of communication that are going to exist to be able to communicate where everything is and how it's going. But the dashboard will definitely be one place that we can say right now where you can access the state of things. We want to make sure that you're spreading the word about that online form. What's going to help make this project a success for our region is being able to provide a very clear picture of what's needed in our region and all of the challenges and the considerations that need to be taken into consideration as well. So we need to collect input from our area far and wide, deep, rural, across our territory to be able to present, to give Baton Rouge or New Orleans a state as much information as they need to be able to consider how to address and bring resolution to the areas of our area and helping us to bridge that digital divide. Those the online forms can be submitted back to you online.
Yeah.
Mailed.
I was going to jump back in and offer one last plug for next steps, right? So I had a chance to kind of jump in and talk a little bit about where do we go from here, and I think we're still on the early side of collecting input. So this is the 8th of the 8 regional stakeholder meetings that we were looking to do. So we've now had a chance to sort of introduce the work that we're doing in every corner of the state. But we know we haven't gotten through to everybody we need to talk to. We know that there's a lot more detail that we need to pull into this plan. And so this last slide here, again, gives you an email address. You can reach out to us. Again, there's so much happening all at once that we're kind of sharing the load there at the Blanco Center with our group email and kind of monitoring that and following up as needed. That QR code, again, will just give you a shortcut to be able to capture and save that contact information. And if email doesn't work, or if you're talking to somebody who wants to reach out via phone, that's my phone number. So you can give them that phone number, and we want to hear from everybody that we can. We've talked about kind of a next major phase here with putting together some focus groups. So if you represent a group or a part of the state and you think that you might even be able to help us put together a focus group and get us connected with some people that could really share their lived experiences. So we could really be hearing directly from some of the people facing the challenges that we talked about today. Please reach out to us and follow up with us. We're looking for more partners throughout the state so that we can really get through to as many people as we can and hear directly from the people of Louisiana. So help with focus groups, as well as ongoing help with collecting input through the online form, just getting additional ideas. You may have some things as you walk out of here today that come to mind, follow-up thoughts. Feel free to come back and fill that out a second or third time if there's just one question you wanted to add more to. We can manage that if there's a bunch of blanks in there. As long as you're giving us something new, we'd love to hear from you. And again, share that link or share this form. We've got some extra copies up here in the front, and we're happy to send you, just email us. We can send you a formatted copy that prints like this so that it's easier to get it all on one page if you want to send that out. Any other support you'd like to offer, any other ideas you can bring to this effort, we welcome those. Please do follow up with us. And thank you again, everyone, for your time today.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate it.